When you go to any certification course and they go along, they certify you that you can teach their curriculum. They don't teach you how to go along and market. They don't teach you how to go along and expand yourself. They don't go along and say, how do you handle somebody who has diabetes and has enlarged digits to pull a trigger on a gun that they can't grip normally? Or how do you go along and reach out to minority groups in order to help them understand their rights and responsibilities? About a year ago, made the conscious decision that I needed to shed some weight, went and talked to my doctor, and we came up with a diet for me. And in the last just about 12 months, I've shed close to 80 pounds. If somebody gets, and tries to prevent me from getting back to my family, I need to do something to make sure that they don't take me away from my family. It's the small decisions that add up. And if you can avoid the situation, if you can run away from the situation, your family won't get the call to say, we need you to come to the hospital because they might not make it in the morning, or go along and get the call from the morgue to say, we need you to come down and identify a body. None of us want to put our families through it. We don't want to put our parents through it. We don't want to put our spouse, our children through it. We'd rather go along, wake up in the morning and say, okay, what's for breakfast?
Pulling the trigger is like the first chapter of the rest of your life that has changed forever. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's might make you think twice. If you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad that you're here. Please subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube, and consider, if you're able, to become a paid subscriber on defenders-live.com. Your support is the only way I'm able to continue doing this labor of love. And also, if you're looking for exceptional firearms and self-defense training, go to defenders-usa.com and look at the calendar to see what's coming to your area this year. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I am your host, Lora Thorson, and tonight I have Rob Beckman on the show. Rob is a married father of 2, a grandfather of 4, and he's from Cincinnati, Ohio. He runs a firearms training business called American Defense Training. He's a certified NRA training counselor and USCCA senior training counselor, as well as a certified firearms instructor with the International Association of Law Enforcement Firearm Instructors. Along with teaching firearm courses, he's also a volunteer hunter education instructor for the state of Ohio, and he volunteers with Scouting American, aka Boy Scouts of America. And his passion for teaching led him to begin the Firearm Trainer podcast in 2019, where they are in their 6th year with over 300 episodes published. And presently, they are in the top 2% of podcasts worldwide account to listen notes. The podcast is focused on helping instructors educate themselves on topics that are not normally taught in their instructor certification classes. We'll have a lot of fun topics we're going to dive into today, but let's welcome Rob onto the show. Hey, Rob, thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on, Laura.
Yeah, well, we don't know each other very well, but it is kind of interesting. I'm having another podcaster on. That's kind of fun. I don't usually do that. So I do appreciate you taking the time. I have noticed that whenever I've been on an interview and I was not the person interviewing, but I was the one getting asked the questions, it always was like a totally different process for me. I don't know if you feel that way or not, but
I kind of feel the same because when I do a podcast, I've got my questions already set up. So it's boom, boom, boom.
Yeah.
When you're in the hot seat, you're just, okay, what's the next question?
I know. It's a little bit different. Yeah. Well, I don't know if I didn't tell you this before the interview, but we were talking about Brian Hill and how much we love him. And we send all of our prayers out to Brian. He's kind of going through some tough stuff right now with his health. And he actually interviewed me on my own show.
There you go. That
so,
sounds like Brian.
Yeah. And he's not afraid to put someone in the hot seat. And it was quite an interesting interview. It was fun, and I trust Brian, so it wasn't that big of a deal. But I was just curious if you felt the same way I did, which was I started sweating because I wasn't in the driver's seat. But so tell me about how the podcast came to be. I know that you're a firearms instructor, a training counselor. It sounds like you help in your community, and this has been an ongoing thing, an ongoing love of yours to help people. Is it kind of an extension of that, or how did this all come about?
Kind of an extension. from when I was younger, I've got 4 siblings, and I'm the second oldest. So I was always, dragging around and trying to help out my younger siblings. They might argue with some of the ways how I helped them, but I always try to help them.
Good
And then
intentions,
as
though.
I, went to school and did different things, was always trying to, help people so that they would, learn. And that kind of just grew into my, into becoming a hunter education instructor. And then as Ohio adopted concealed carry, I became a concealed carry instructor. And then I went along and, okay, how can I pass, besides just teaching concealed carry, how can I pass this on to other people? So I got certified in additional disciplines for rifle, shotgun, muzzleloading. Then went along and said, well, how can I go along and teach people to teach people type of thing. And as I kept going, I found that I had lots of people that would call me up and say, I've got a problem for you. How would I go along and help somebody who had a handicap, couldn't hold a regular gun? Or how would you handle this kind of situation? And I was finding myself answering these, and, I was always helping people. Yeah. And then I was at SHOT Show 2019, sitting around with the group from concealedcarry.com. They've got a very successful podcast. You've had Riley Bowman on before, and talking to Riley and Jacob Paulson. It was just like, ever thought about doing another podcast? And they're like, focused on what? Because, and I said, well, about firearm training, because the problem comes in with firearm training, and this may not be obvious to a lot of people, but when you go to any certification course and they go along, they certify you that you can teach their curriculum. They don't teach you how to go along and market. They don't teach you how to go along and, expand yourself. They don't go along and say, how do you handle somebody who has diabetes and has enlarged digits to pull a trigger on a gun that they can't grip normally? Or how do you go along and reach out to minority groups in order to help them, understand their rights and responsibilities? And that's where, when I first jumped on and started doing episodes for it, you'll see there's a lot about, how can instructors make money? How can they expand their knowledge, do things like that? But since then, we've gone into some other avenues, which I think are also very important for instructors to know, such as mental health. For it. How can you go along as the instructor standing in front of a group and kind of get a clue, how's this person, feeling? What should you do for people? What kind of resources can be available? Because there's a lot of people, I talk to, it's like, I don't have any mental problems. And it's like, that's great. But I can tell you, if all of a sudden you've got a parent, a child who, illness, or, they die, if you go along tomorrow and lose your job and find out that, they're not going to give you severance and you've got to pay the mortgage. If you find out that you're in a relationship and, that breaks up, without any warning, or you go along and you go to the doctor's office and say, sorry, we'd like to, you need to tell you this, and here's your options. You got to make a decision here in the next week or two, because you got to make a decision, or else it's too late for it. And those are all what I would say put us into a tailspin. And the thing I always say about when it comes to mental health and firearms are, firearm owners are terribly successful with suicide, because we choose firearms over other ways of, committing it. And that's where, again, firearm owners learn the signs. Don't be afraid to ask, hey, Lora, you seem a little bit different. How's it going? And if you trust me and I trust you, you can go along and say something like, hey, I'm having problems. And, this is what's going on. Doctor just told me. And, if we're being responsible gun owners, maybe we'll say, hey, how about if I hold your guns for a little while? How about,
is there a little organization for that?
Yes, there is.
Yeah,
and
I think I've reached out to that person.
Had them on my podcast before, and that's where trying to build this so people realize the stigma of suicide. The only way to breaking it is going along and asking questions. How do you feel?
Yeah, and most people don't want to do that because it's uncomfortable. But I think that someone, if they're a true friend of yours and they really truly care about you, they have to speak the truth to you in love. And sometimes that's so difficult to do. And oftentimes I find for me that it's a very courageous thing to do, to confront someone that you love with something that is very, it might not be obvious. It might just be kind of have an inkling, an idea, a tugging, or a nudge, I guess you could call it. But I think not acting on those sometimes can be really dangerous. I wanted to plug your podcast here too. Do I have this correct? Is it firearmtrainerpodcast.com?
Yes, it is.
Okay, just for the audience, and AmericanDefenseTraining.us. We'll leave that up for a second while we keep going, because I just wanted people to know where to go.
Yeah, one thing I go along and tell people when it comes to suicide, you're not trying to talk somebody off the edge of a building. If they're that far, they probably really need some professional help. But I think we can all identify that there are certain times in our lives where we just feel really, really low. And when there's a friendly person that shows some concern, it makes all the difference. It could be a parent, it could be a sibling, it could just be a friend. And that makes all the difference, because I've known several families that have, experienced suicide. And the worst thing about it is, as go along and say, the survivors have survivor's guilt, because they're like, well, why didn't they talk to me? Why didn't they come to me? Why is their biggest question, and they'll never get an answer to that. And that's where going along and making sure people realize it's like, hey, you might feel your life's terrible, but there's somebody who, wants to see you here tomorrow. There's somebody who's willing to go along and help you through those dark times. And, it's one of those who realize we all go through dark times, and just, bring those resources, because, Hold My Guns, the Armory Project, Walk Talk America, all those different type of resources are things that instructors can go along and say, I have no idea what you're going through, but how about if I give you a resource here? Yeah. And that's where that might just be enough to keep somebody's, son, wife, things like that, from doing something that's irreversible, to going along and finding out it's like, it's not as bad as it is. I went along and talked to somebody, and Monday morning I got a job offer. That's even better. That's closer to my house. It's doing something that I really, really do like, and things look a lot better. And those are the types of things to where, once you get out from underneath those dark clouds, you realize that, there's a lot of people that are out there that love you, want to see you around. And, suicide does not solve anybody's problems.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think that's a first on the show in that particular arena. So that you were talking about, times that people feel low and reaching out to others. And this kind of goes along with one of the things I noticed about you, and the reason I asked you on the show. We are in a mastermind together where we get together with other, I guess, podcasters, YouTubers, I don't know. And,
social influencers, I like to call ourselves.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if I call myself that or not, but that sounds fun, doesn't it?
Yes.
But I noticed one time there was a particular person on our mastermind who was having a little bit of difficulty, and it was such a simple thing that you did, but you just in that moment acknowledged that person's struggles and encourage them in a very meaningful, authentic way. And that was the moment where I thought, you know what, there's more to this guy than just being a social media influencer or podcaster. Like, you really showed that you really have a heart for people. And I really appreciated seeing that. And you also spoke briefly about your own personal story. And I don't know if you'd be willing to share any of that or not, but you've had some health struggles of your own recently. I don't know if they've been ongoing or what that's been all about, but could you share any of that with us?
Well, I'll share. And quite honestly, this is the first time I've really have done it very publicly, but about a year ago, made the conscious decision that I needed to shed some weight because my A1C, your blood sugar, was getting high. Doctor was saying, that's not good. Cholesterol was high, and I was already on medications for it. And being low energy, and I'm normally not a low energy type of guy, went and talked to my doctor, and we came up with a diet for me. And in the last just about 12 months, I've shed close to 80 pounds.
Wow.
So what I look like now is quite a bit different than what I was a year ago. Yeah. And to put that into real terms for people, I went along and said I hunt a lot. And being in Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, we've got several 100-foot hills and valleys that you climb up and down, and I'm dragging deer out from these places, different things like that. And it's not easy when you're dragging an extra 80 pounds yourself. And I can tell you from last hunting season to being down that much weight made it, I won't say easy, but made quite a bit difference. I could tell when I was, pulling the deer out, doing different things like that. And that's, one of those things where, I encourage people to, have those frank conversations with your doctor, because everybody's unique. Yeah. And I didn't want to go along and get on, medicine, get in the range where I had diabetes. Diabetes runs in my family for it. I have German ancestor, and we always kind of blame that on, being large guys. I'm, 6'4", and I was pushing close to 330 pounds. So I was no small guy, to say the least. And now I'm, Actually, today I'm down below 250. So I'm plus a little bit over 80 pounds that I've lost, and I'm working toward another 20 pounds. And part of that is going along and looking at the life I've got. I've got a great wife. I've got, 2 kids. I've got, my son-in-law and a daughter-in-law. I've got 4 great grandkids. 4 grandkids that are great. That came out wrong. And here's something that hopefully not too many of your listeners know my family, but we're expecting a 5th grandchild now.
Aww.
So that'll be really great to hear. And that's one of those things where the further you get along in life, some people look at their bank account and take their value from that, and we've all got to look at that, because the money makes the retirement happen, makes the world go round. But I also go along and look at the blessings that I've had when it comes to kids and grandkids. Just got back from a trip with my 84-year-old mother down to the Panama Canal.
Aww.
Now, she is first generation German here in the United States. So if that doesn't give you a clue of how determined she is about things, she's 84 years old, has had 2 knee replacements, 1 hip replacement, and we brought her a walker on the boat so that she wouldn't have problems walking as the boat went from side to side. But she didn't let anything stop her. She got her cane, she walked around, and she did things. And by golly, if somebody wasn't listening to her, she got an answer to whatever her question was on the excursions that we took. And that's one of those things to where I'm hoping when I'm in my 80s that I will have the same will to live, because she's 84 years old and she still puts between 25 and 30,000 miles on her car a year. Wow. Because she refuses to slow down and miss any of her grandkids, soccer games, softball games, recitals, anything along those lines. If you tell her that something's happening, she will make things happen. She has friends that are in their 90s that she has lunch with, that she's got to drive 30 and 40 miles to go see them, because she realizes that her time's limited, but she's not going to go along and waste that time just sitting watching TV. She's going to go out, and she's got a great garden she takes care of, and when she wants to go someplace, she jumps in the car and goes someplace.
Do you think that you have some of that same drive and attitude that your mom has?
The stubbornness? Oh yeah.
No, the determination.
Oh yeah.
I bet that probably helped you in your journey, your weight loss journey. I'm just guessing.
Well, it helps because I look at my weight, I weigh myself, and then I go along and like, okay, where do I need to be? What do I want to do? Type of thing. And that's where life catches up to you. To where you get busy with work, you get busy with the kids, and you don't exercise as much as you need to or want to. And that's where I kind of got away from it. And, weight, especially after the pandemic, I put on probably 30 or so pounds during, those 4 years of the pandemic. Nothing seemed to be too quick, and we're just working at home, and all of a sudden you realize like, wow, I've put on quite a bit. And, when you start talking to your doctor and having those frank conversations, it's like, okay, we can put you on medication, if you become diabetic, to control your blood sugar, or if you can start losing some weight, you can go non-medicated. And, I'm not against medications or anything else like that, but the fewer medications I'm on now, the better I think it'll be long-term, because I would not want to be 80 years old and, have to carry around a medicine cabinet with me, because I've got to take pills with every meal, or take pills, in the morning and at night, all the time. I still have high cholesterol, so I still take those, and I still take vitamins just to make sure, because to say I want to be here not just for my grandkids, but for my great grandkids, because they're if you don't have your own grandkids yet, I would say just wait until you have them, because they are God's gift to grandparents. How much fun they are. They're just 100% innocent, and at the same time I can look at my kids and say, this is payback.
It's hard, isn't it?
I can get them all riled up, and it's like, good night, go home, calm down.
That's so heartwarming to hear you speak about your grandkids, and it sounds like that that's maybe part of the reason that's driven you to stay healthy, to not let yourself go off the side street too far. Do you have any advice for anybody who might currently be in that situation that you were in when you decided to make a change? I know a lot of people tend to get really stuck, and feel like they're kind of in a rut, and they can't change their patterns of behavior, their habits. They keep reverting back. Were there anything in particular that you learned that might be useful to others to help change those patterns?
Well, I think the first thing is realize you're getting older. The heavier you are, the faster your joints wear out. The older you get, the more things affect you. So, I started off talking to my doctor because, I've had the same doctor probably for 20 years now, and we've got a good relationship to where he can look over my records and say, this is where you are, this is what the current test results come back at, and have a frank conversation about that. And that's where, you have those conversations, and I trust what he tells me, and I'm, giving him information, and then, can kind of work from there, because, all what I got to do is kind of think about, okay, where do I want to be? Yes, I would love to be in the shape I was in high school, and be in that kind of shape. I don't know if I'll quite ever be back in that kind of shape, because I'm 40 years older than I was in high school. But at the same time, I know, that I want to be there for my grandkids. I want to be in, good health. I don't want to be winded just walking up a hill. I want to be able to play around with them. And it's, it's a lot of fun when you can go along and run around, literally run with your grandkids. And, I'm not running a marathon, but it's still kind of fun to be able to go outside and run around with them, because they get the experience of being with their grandfather. They get the experience of doing things. And I get to go along and give my kids a little bit of a break from being parenting. I can remember, there are times, especially my son and daughter-in-law, they've got 4 kids that are 6'4", 2, and one to come. So they've got quite a handful. And when you can go along and kind of say, okay, I'll go outside and play with them, and you can sit in here without having to worry about them. That's one of those gifts that I can give my kids, even even at my age, type of thing that they can appreciate. Because I can remember when my in-laws would take the kids, where my wife and I just would sit down like, what are we going to do now? It's like, we're going to do nothing. We're just going to sit here and not do a single thing.
Yeah, they're so lucky to have you. That's so great. Wonderful. Well, that sounds like good motivation. You've got heaps and heaps of motivation. So good on you. Kudos to you for taking that step. That's huge. And it sounds like it's going to be ongoing, and that's okay. But that's just a lifestyle change that, slowly over time, you can do. And you've proven that you can be persistent with it, and that it works. And I just wanted to kind of bring that to light, because I know that was something that came up.
And here's something I would tell people to do. Don't beat yourself up too bad. Okay. We just came off the holiday season. Okay. And I put on a few pounds between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then being on a cruise, but right back on the horse again. And I gave myself permission to, sit back and maybe not exercise as much as I would normally do, on the cruise. I gave myself permission to go along and enjoy, a little bit of chocolate around Christmas time, and just those types of things. And that's where, the balance I strike is I watch my weight, by a scale, and then, but I don't go along and torture myself with, not eating those types of things. If I'm doing all right, I'll have a piece of candy. I'll have a donut now and then. Now, am I going to have 6 donuts? No, that's too much. But, I don't have to I'm at a point where I don't have to go along and worry about things that minutely. But I do watch it from a macro level, say, okay, where is my weight at? If I had that donut yesterday, maybe I need to watch out a little bit more, eat some more carrots and celery today, versus going along and, eating a hamburger or a big steak.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that with us. I can't believe that's the first time that you've shared that. I think you would want to share that with your audience. I guess it's not about firearms trainer, though.
Well, here's one of the things that I will tell you, my fears about it. And my brother will laugh his butt off about this, okay? When I started this, I had a 46-inch waist, okay?
Wow.
I would not buy new clothes for about the first 6 months, because I literally was fearful of going along and gaining the weight back.
Oh yeah, me too. I went on the same thing. Yeah.
And it's one of those things, because my brother also, is a big guy. Also, he's 6'5", and when I decided to get new pants, he went along and I gave him my pants. And the good thing about it is through my motivation of doing things, he's dropped weight. He's down, I think, about 30 pounds now.
See, you're inspiring people, Rob.
Yeah, and he's able to wear my old pants, and then he keeps going along and joking with me I need to lose weight because he needs new pants type of thing. And that's one of those things to where, but it is, I got to honestly say it was an honest fear that I would go backwards. And I've been at the same waistline now for about the last 3 months. Yeah. And that's, they're getting a little looser. They didn't go as loose as the new ones, but I've gone from a 46 down to a 38. So that's, a pretty big difference. And if I can get down to a 34, I'll be down to the waistline I had when I graduated high school.
Wow. Wow, that's huge. But that is so important that you talked about that, because I've been on a journey myself, and it's not exactly like your journey, but it's interesting that some of the same feelings along the path were very, very similar. And I've talked about it on the show before, where I feel like I went through 3 phases, and I've been on this journey for probably 1.5 years now. And I tell people the first phase of the journey for me was the negative self-talk of, who do you think you are? And then once I got past that, and I just kind of kept plugging along every day. And then I got to this point, and it's a really gradual thing, right? I think people have this idea that like with anything, there's a silver bullet answer to anything, or a silver bullet, outcome to anything. And there never is. The things that last the longest, I believe, take the most time and are slowly developed over time. But the second phase then that I found myself in was the phase you're talking about, where I had come so far, and I thought, I'm so scared I'm going to revert back to the way I was before, because I didn't have that self-image yet, or that self-belief that that's who I was. And then slowly, as I just kept going, I think my identity and my self-image finally, I guess, morphed into, or what, I don't know how to say it, but I finally got to a point where this just became who I am.
You accept over
time.
Who you are.
Yeah.
And that's a,
and I'm proud of it. I'm happy for it. I'm proud of it. I'm disciplined in it. And I've proven to myself, much like what I think you're saying, I've proven to myself now through consistent discipline over time that this is who I am. And I now believe it. So I think that's really part of the journey, just as much as the physical part is. I think the psychological part of it is big too. So, well, good. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. Hey guys, I want to offer you something that is a personal touch, something special that I can share with you to help you grow and develop along this journey in this path as a defender. And what I'm offering is a monthly live call that you can participate in. And we're going to be talking about the 4 areas that I believe all defenders of life should be strong in. And those are physical fitness, emotional fitness, spiritual fitness, and training. So if you're interested in learning about those things and developing yourself throughout that journey, I'm here to help you. And I want my paid subscribers to have that personal touch of getting to talk with me one-on-one in this group call and sharing with others and encouraging others along this path. So if you'd like to get in on those calls, go to defenders-live.com, become a paid subscriber. I cannot wait to see you there. And thank you so much for your support of Defenders Live. Let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm interested to learn a little bit more about your podcast. And I think you said 300 episodes. That's quite a few,
315 or so
Yeah.
Yep, episodes.
So you've had a lot of experience with a lot of different kinds of people, I can imagine. Are there any that really stand out to you that were very impactful to you? What are some of your favorites, or maybe your least favorites? I don't know if you want to talk about those.
Probably one of the most impactful. And this was kind of early on. I had Mike Sidoni from Walk Talk America. And I think it was the second time I had him on. He's been on the podcast about 4 times. He's been doing some really great work when it comes to educating gun owners about mental health. But during the interview, I went along and had a friend who was a veteran, Vietnam veteran, who was hunter education instructor, kind of like me. And he had problems at one point, so much so that he left a message on my phone. I had to call. He wasn't in my town. I had to call 911 in his county to have them send out like veteran services or a wellness check for him, because I wasn't sure how he was. And one of the things that really struck me on that one was Mike actually went along and said on the interview, "You saved his life."
Wow.
And that was the first time that, I kind of really felt, never thought about that. I just thought I'm trying to help somebody. And even here I'm, getting some chills and different things like that, because you just do what comes natural to you. And I couldn't, he was 3 hours away from me, so I couldn't jump in the car and do something. It was wintertime like this. So it's like, okay, if he's outside and he's not not in the right frame of mind, he needs somebody to, help him. And, unfortunately, a couple years later, he passed away. So I, never was able to really circle back around with him. But when somebody goes along and actually tells you, you saved his life, it's one of those, like, I never thought about it that way. I was just what I would call do the right thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's an excellent example. We don't ever know what our impact is on people, on their lives, whether it's what you just talked about or, the podcast that we do, Rob. We don't know who's listening that day. We don't know who needs to hear the message that we have. And I do think that it's really important that we do it anyway. I feel like in the world that we live in, getting really a little bit obsessed maybe with views and likes and clicks and all that stuff is like not where it's at for me. I feel like I wouldn't even care what those are. I would still show up, and I do every single week to do this because I feel like I have a purpose in this. I feel like I'm called to do it. And I think you probably have that same feeling. And I think maybe we might be similar in that regard.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing good, and I've listened to a few of your back episodes and such. One of the things as firearm instructors, we kind of get grouped into this, shoot them all like God, sort them out kind of attitude. People, that's the way they think firearm instructors are. But what I really go along and try to make sure people realize, we are the counselors. We are the people that are talking to about, okay, when you go along, you got to have a good draw stroke, put the sights on the trigger, and then a really good trigger press. But we also go along and have to coach the people through, okay, what are you seeing? What are you going along? What is that threat? Can you go along and do a proper evaluation of a threat? Because I always bring up the point where if somebody came into the room where you're at with a baseball bat, would that be a threat? And everybody's like, yeah, sure. I'd put him down right there. And I said, well, what happens if it's a 10-year-old kid? Like, well, wait, that's different. It's like, okay, but this is where you've got to be in the right frame of mind to where, don't shoot them all like God sort them out. Go along and make sure whatever's going to happen that you can live with it, because that will be somebody's son, their daughter, their spouse, their sibling, all those different types of things. And that's where you've really got to go along and be in the right frame of mind, because I go along and say in our society, it's not very popular to go along and run, to have a fight in front of you and run. But I said, that's
just for me.
If you have the opportunity to get out of there,
yeah,
that's your safest bet, because once it goes past there, and I've had Andrew Branca, author of Law of Self-Defense, on, and he said it most succinctly in that if you are engaged in a violent confrontation that could lead to severe bodily harm or death, then you have a greater than zero chance of bodily harm and death, just by definition. If you are saying that you've got to defend yourself, then you've got that chance.
Right.
If you run away, you have 100% chance of surviving and seeing tomorrow.
Or if you avoid it in the first place.
Well,
if you're able to.
Yeah. But we're not there trying to go along clean up society. The police are there to arrest the criminals and make judgments and do things like that. We're not there to go along and make a political statement or anything else along those lines. We're there for our family. We're trying to make it back to our family. So if somebody gets, and tries to prevent me from getting back to my family, I need to do something to make sure that they don't take me away from my family. If somebody tries to attack my family, I need to go along and, do things appropriately so that my family's not, can be there tomorrow for me. And you just go along and have, you're there for your family. It helps on a lot of decisions, because it's very cavalier to go along and just let them try that with me. I'll show them what happens. But what happens? Look at Chris Kyle, the American Sniper, all the success he had, and it took just 1 second where something went wrong and somebody took his life. And that's where, you've got to go along and really realize that it's the small decisions that add up. And if you can avoid the situation, if you can run away from the situation, you'll be there for your family, and you won't. Your family won't get the call to say, we need you to come to the hospital, because they might not make it in the morning, or go along and get the call from the morgue to say, we need you to come down and identify a body. Those are two situations where I go along and say, none of us want to put our families through it. We don't want to put our parents through it. We don't want to put our spouse, our children through it. We'd rather go along, wake up in the morning and say, okay, what's for breakfast? Where are we going tomorrow? Those kind of things, versus going along. And that's not the same message that all firearm instructors have. But one of the things I try to instill in the classes I teach and on the podcast too, that we've got to prepare as much of getting our trigger finger, set and ready. We've also got to make sure we get our minds set in the right place, because if we are forced to defend ourselves, and this is where I've had several different attorneys on, the legal meat grinder is going to be extremely tough on us.
Yeah.
And where you're going to be questioning, should I really have done that? I didn't know this person was that, and now they're calling me that. All those different types of things. And that's where, if you've done everything you could to avoid the situation, and they put you through the judicial meat grinder, you can at least sit there and say, I did what I had to do. I'll sit in jail, until the trial, because at least I'm here for my family. My family can visit me. They don't have to go to the hospital. They don't have to go to the morgue, those type of situations. And if you can say that, then what you're doing is what you need to do to be there for your family.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And we speak about that quite a bit on the show, although I have had quite a wide variety of guests over the last year. I tend to go on all different kinds of directions, and it's fun for me and I enjoy it. And it all ties in with the umbrella of self-defense, though. And what you talked about there too is really important, which is the legal meat grinder that I don't think a lot of people think much about. And I don't think it can be stressed enough for people to have at least some understanding of the aftermath of a self-defense situation. And I was this way too when I first got into the gun community. I didn't think a whole lot about it. But to consider that, I think to leave that part out is really negligent, because pulling the trigger is really, pulling the trigger is like the first chapter of the rest of your life that is changed forever. I mean, when you look at it that way, it's might make you think twice.
Yeah. Here's two examples from force-on-force classes that I've done during my training. Had a situation to where we set up a house with a living room, family room, and then kitchen. And somebody heard a knock, and the lady who was the student went through. She got her pistol from the end table. So she was armed, she was ready, and she was going to go along, and she was going to make it back to where her bedroom was, because her kids were back there. So there was a reason why she had to go through the rest of the house. Well, we had the perpetrator, who was dressed up as an ape in an ape suit. So nothing, you could very easily tell, came out and scared her. And she started screaming and didn't shoot, didn't do anything. And we debriefed and said, what went on? And she completely forgot that she was holding a firearm. And that's one of those situations to where, yes, when everything was okay, start, I got to go get the inert gun so she could go along and defend herself. But then when the situation actually arose, she completely forgot that she needed to defend herself. And that's where, again, the mindset, you got to make sure you shift the mindset shift. And she was a great shot. She just had never shifted her mindset to go along and saying, okay, if somebody pops out on me, what am I going to do? Now here's another one that happened just last year. Went along and had a couple owners from a local gun shop come to my force-on-force class, because they really wanted to go along and get a little better feel for how they would react if somebody came in their gun shop and started shooting and wanted to rob them. I mean, it happens, right, these days? Well, went along. We had the person come, the bad guy had a pistol in his waistband. He comes in the front door. And the gun shop owner starts shooting at him. So
it was in his waistband?
Yeah. So the bad guy who was starts shooting back at him. They both got shot. Okay, which is like, well, that's a really bad ending to this story. But then also got to ask, okay, why did you shoot him to begin with? He's like, because he had a gun. And everybody looked at him and was like, you're a gun shop. What would you expect them to do? But it's one of those things to where we've got to make sure we're not looking at things that don't matter. I mean, what do they look like? That doesn't really matter as much as, what is their how are they walking? What are they doing? Are they looking around, for cameras? All these things to kind of get a little clue about what their intention is, because no matter who it is, if they're like, hey, I just want to find a holster for this gun, you want to sell it to them. You don't want to start shooting at them. Jeez. And, he kind of realized that, hey, he just got a little bit amped up to where, boom, he just shot whoever came in the door next. And that's one of those really really important things for people to realize, because we also point out to people that after a dynamic critical incident to where you might have to defend yourself in your house or at your place of work, you could have a coworker, you could have a spouse, you could have other customers come up to you from behind or different, and you've got to go along and have the state of mind not to turn around and shoot them. You just shot the bad person, but you also have the right state of mind of saying, okay, who else is a threat? And we do different exercises to go along and demonstrate how to break tunnel vision, how to go along and make sure that you don't become a secondary victim, because I watch John Correa, Active Self-Protection, a lot of his videos, and some of the videos where I just cringe are the ones where you've got the convenience store owners where they go along and defend themselves successfully from the burglar, but then they go outside chasing after his accomplice. But out in the parking lot, there's 4 or 5 other accomplices, and then the store owner ends up getting shot because he left the safety of his store. And that's where we point out that, yes, if you go along and watch the Hollywood videos, you watch the police dramas, different things like that, that's what everybody does. They run after and arrest that, or get that last person to rid society of these criminals. The problem is, from a self-defense standpoint, we've got to help our students have the right mindset to say, wait a minute, I'm safe. Anybody else coming to that door, I can go along and make a quick judgment call on it, but I'm safe here.
Right.
Went along. One of the toughest students I ever had to teach was actually in a concealed carry class. And this person came to concealed carry class because their garage kept getting broken into. And they said flat out, I'm going to get my concealed carry license. Next time they break into it, I'm going to run out there and I'm going to hold them for the cops to show up. And I had to unfortunately burst their bubble, because it's like, hate to tell you, they're stealing, a $300 chainsaw. They're stealing your $200 weed whacker, something else like that. And like, yeah, I'm going to stop them. It's like, okay, is it 1 or 2 people? Well, I'm not sure. Okay. That would be nice to know, because if it's 2 people and one's in front of you, where's the other one? Are they armed or aren't they armed? Type of thing. Do you have an axe in the garage that they could potentially, throw at you or do different things like that? And as we go through the different scenarios, they go along and they look at me like, so you're telling me the best thing for me to do is to stay in the house? And it's like, well, if you want to be there for your family in the morning, yes. And that's when things kind of went off, that, what's in the garage, it upsets all of us when we're victimized for it. But if our main goal is to be there for our family, we can replace the car, we can replace the lawnmower, whatever goes on, because they're out there and we're safe in our house. We can call 911, we can be a good witness. But if we go along and try to go on the offensive and go after them, who knows what's going to happen? And that's where, bad things can happen very quickly. You lose a lot of your legal defense if you go after somebody, if you leave your house. And that's where people a lot of times don't understand the meat grinder, literally, that the legal system can be. I know a few people that know George Zimmerman. 10 years ago, that all happened down there in Florida. And the big thing I bring up about that, no matter what you think of the case, George Zimmerman had to go along and change his name because he couldn't get a job, at a night clerk at a gas station, because somebody'd see George Zimmerman on the application. It's like, yeah, we'll call you, if we, need anything, because his name became so synonymous and such a lightning rod that he had to move. He had to change his name. And when you think about that, even today, 10 years later, people still know who George Zimmerman is. Kyle Rittenhouse. You say his name, as soon as he was found innocent, and somebody said he was going down to Arizona State University, they had campus protest. Think how that would make you feel. If you had to go along and defend yourself against somebody, what would your neighbors say in your neighborhood? What would your family say? What would your church say about things? Would they go along and ask you maybe not to show up anymore because there's people that aren't comfortable with you being in the congregation? Now, I know, if you've had a violent confrontation, you got to defend yourself, you're going to want some guidance. Going to church would be one of those places. And to be told that you need to find another church would really hurt. But those are some of the costs that you've got to be ready to pay if you've got to defend yourself. And that's why, run away. Avoid it altogether, doing those types of things. Why I recommend it so much? Because most people aren't ready to pay that kind of price, and they figure they're just going to be pat on the back and say, you just got rid of public enemy number 1. They had a rap sheet a mile long. That sounds really good in Hollywood movies, but guess what? It doesn't do anything. It has nothing to do with reality. And depending upon where I'm at in Ohio, something that goes on here may not fly a couple counties over. And that's where, states are pretty consistent, but we've seen just in modern legal processing that one county in the same state might prosecute things a little differently in another county for it. And those are all things that people really, really need to go along and embody, to where if you can honestly say, in court, that I did everything in my power to get away, to avoid the situation, but I was forced to defend myself, you get a pretty good case. But if you go along and say, well, he called me a name and I wasn't going to put up for it, and we got stand your ground in my state. So I stood my ground and he got what was coming to him. Guess what? You're going to find out just how much grinding the legal system can do on you. And
and it's a slow grind too, isn't it, Rob?
Well, it'll be financial, it'll be emotional, it'll be, what happens if you lose all your friends in your town,
or your house.
I mean, just trying to pay your legal, your house, your retirement, those types of things.
Right.
Those are the costs where, I love going along and teaching people how to go along, do a good trigger pull to be able to go along, be accurate, and be able to move and shoot. But I also like going along and making sure they got a keen appreciation for the legal process of what they could get into if they do have to defend themselves, not to deter them from carrying or defending themselves, but making sure that when they stand up in front of court, when they get interviewed by the police, they can say, I did this, this, and this. I had nothing more I could do.
Yeah.
And, they're going to say, well, there's no way we can charge them with anything, because I would have done the same thing. I tried to avoid the situation, but they just keep coming after.
That's why it's called self-defense, not self-offense.
And things get mixed up. Politics picks up. Your stand your ground, the castle doctrine, all these types of things, and those are those are legal.
They're not a free pass to be an idiot.
They're not a free pass, and they make them sound like they're a free pass. When politicians talk about it, but when you look at them actually in practice, they're not. They're good to have, so don't get me wrong on that. But at the same time, if you go along and tell them that you stood your ground, you're on shaky ground right there legally, because then they can attack you on a lot of different fronts. If you say you were running away when you had to defend yourself, that's going to be a lot harder to attack, because a jury is going to go along and look and say, what else could he have done? He did what he could and had to defend himself, and and that's how things ended up.
Yeah. Really, really, really good information for people listening and watching. And this type of information, I don't think could ever be talked about enough in our space, in our world. And, there was a point in my, career and as a journey as a concealed carrier that I had to learn all these things. So I'm just really glad that, that you brought all of these up, because for me, the longer that I'm in this world, in this industry, in this community, these types of things just are common sense to me, but to many people they're not. And so it's very important that these are vocalized and communicated in a way that makes sense. And this is just like tip of the iceberg, guys. This is like, this is just the beginning of learning all of this stuff.
Well, here's something else that we've got 28 states now that have constitutional carry or some form of it. And I go along and I tell people, I'm 100% behind constitutional carry. It's a right, and you should be able to exercise that right. The thing I always go along and tell people is, when it comes to rights, it also comes to responsibility. And that's the part that a lot of times people don't realize, that, hey, I can carry a gun. I don't need the government to tell me I can. Well, let's put it this way. Do you have a criminal background that you might be prohibited from carrying a gun? That's a big one. Or B, do you know the areas where you can't carry a gun? You can't go down to the police station, have a gun on your waist, and not get into some kind of trouble. You can't go in school zones, all these different things. And that's when people are like, wow, it's like, hey, whether you've got a piece of plastic with concealed carry license on it, or you carry constitutional, you still got to know this. Just, keep in mind, at least when you go through a concealed carry class, you go along and, you're given all this information. Right. The other thing I go along and also tell people is the likelihood of you using your gun in a self-defense situation is very, very low compared to you having the proper knowledge and to go along and be able to survive. And what I add into that survival part of it is knowing some basic first aid. If you come across a car accident and somebody's bleeding, your gun ain't going to do nothing for them. You need to know how to use a tourniquet. You need to know how to do CPR. You need to know how to go along and do chest seals, do wound packing, different things along those lines, because we're very, unfortunately, accustomed to pick up the phone, call 911, and then a couple minutes later, an ambulance rolls up. Well, I
not
live
around here.
Well, I'm close enough to the city to where they'll be here in 5 to 10 minutes.
Yeah.
But if you've got a bad bleed, you may not have 5 or 10 minutes.
That's true.
You go out where my mom is, and it could be 15 to 30 minutes before an ambulance arrive. And that's where you need to know, okay, how do you do CPR? How do you do mouth to mouth? How do you go along and take care of bleeding? How do you take care of just some basic stuff? We're not talking about heart surgery here. We're talking about basic first aid.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where you'll use it a heck of a lot more than you'll ever go along and have to use your gun. And if you're going to go along and be carrying knives and guns, pepper spray, those types of self-defense, you should also be carrying something that you can go along, take care of you or somebody else, because guess what? If you defend your family successfully, great, great job. But those bullets weren't necessarily, just aimed at you. They were aimed at all over. So you might have an innocent bystander or one of your family members that you need to go along and attend to very quickly in order to save them. Because again, this is one of those things that people don't realize. When you have anything with firearm involved, the police are the first ones to show up, and their first job is to go along and secure the scene. They're not there to go along and save people. The paramedics aren't going to run in. I've got family that have been firefighters, and they will tell you in the big cities, they will go along and stage 3 to 4 blocks away, and they might see the body in the middle of the street, but they go along and say they don't get any closer to it until the police give them the all clear.
Yeah.
I happened to be traveling at the time that Parkland happened down in Florida. And I use this as an example because as they had the camera, the choppers in the sky with the video, they saw kids coming out of the school. They were talking, you could see people carrying other wounded out of the building. And I go along and ask the question, why do you think they were carrying them out? And it's like, get the first aid. It's like, well, weren't the first responders already in there? And they kind of give me a blank look. And it's like, the first responders are in there making sure there were no other shooters in the building. And they walk over the people that are bleeding. They walk over the people that are, laying on the ground, because their best thing they can do at that point is to stop the threat. Once they stop the threat, then they can bring the whole army of firefighters in there to do the first aid. But you have to go along and be your first responders to go along and say, okay, nobody's going to be coming here for a half an hour. How do I improvise a tourniquet? What do I do for a chest seal? How do I go along and do this? Or can I drag myself out of this building? And those are all things that, again, as a defender for it, you want to be able to go along and have the proper mindset to help yourself, help others, so you can be there for your family tomorrow. And that's kind of, what I've always kind of boiled my classes down to is, if you come out of my class with nothing else than a greater appreciation that you've got to do everything you can to be there tomorrow for your family, then, I've done a good job. And
you're doing a lot of things, Rob, to be there for your family, not just firearms instruction, but taking care of yourself. So really appreciate the conversation today. It was really good.
You got to look at a whole package,
Right?
If I carry a gun and can't run, guess what? I'm a sitting duck. If I don't have skills to go along and defend myself from an animal or different things like that, I'm not going to be there for my family. Sometime
a lot more to it.
One of these days that time will come to where I won't be there, but I'm not going to do anything to speed it up. Is my attitude. Yeah,
I love that. Well, I really appreciate your time, Rob. It was so much fun. You guys can check out Rob's podcast on firearmtrainerpodcast.com, and you're on all the platforms, right? Apple Podcast, Spotify, you name it. He's on all of them, right? Yeah. Okay. And then check out his training website, AmericanDefenseTraining.us. Awesome.
And can I do one thing, Laura, real fast?
Yeah.
Hi, Mom. She watches all the podcasts, and I'm guessing she's stopped listening to my podcast because she's like, I'm not interested in that stuff. It's like, okay, but tell me when you're on other people's podcasts. So I always send her the link, and she'll get a big laugh out of that. I love that you're watching. That's so cool. You're such an inspiration. That is so cool. Well, thank you for watching, Mom, if you're watching. All right, Rob, well, take care. Thank you again for your time. Thanks, Laura.